All right, guys, welcome to the show. Happy Thanksgiving, too, by the way. Hope everybody's having a good one out there. Try not to get too triggered by your MAGA uncle. There's always another room in the house. There's always a TV you can zone out and watch. So don't get too frustrated. By the way, I feel your pain. So in just a second, we're going to get to a MAGA Hellstate implementing the worst possible tax policy and just how much that's going to screw regular people. We'll also get to the United States defending Israel's murder of a 5-year-old girl in Gaza. That's a disgusting story. Then I'll discuss Trump's massive illegal surveillance plot. And we have the first official 2028 presidential favorites revealed in a new poll. And then later on, Trump is already committing to decimating student loan debt relief, and he's demanding higher payments than there were. So, I mean, just as bad as you can get, if I'm being honest with you. So everybody do me a big favor. Please subscribe to the channel. That helps out massively, and it costs you absolutely nothing. And much love to everybody who supports this show on Patreon or tips on YouTube. I deeply appreciate it. This is real independent media. It's not fake independent media like so many others in this space. All right, let's go ahead and dive into it. In the state of Louisiana, lawmakers just passed an income and corporate tax cut, and they raised statewide sales taxes to pay for it. So let me tell you what their strategy usually is. When Republicans are campaigning, they talk a lot about tax cuts. In fact, it's their number one policy proposal that is the most consistent year after year, election cycle after election cycle. And what they do is they try to convince people, I'm talking about you. I'm talking about your taxes. Regular Joe Schmo out there, regular Jane Doe out there. In fact, I remember having a conversation with my uncle. My uncle was a evangelical Christian and a hardcore Republican. And I remember him saying to me when I was still either in high school or college, he's like, as soon as you get out in the real world, man, you'll understand why it makes sense to vote Republican because you want to keep more of your paycheck. This is what he said to me. And so my whole life, this is the dominant narrative. This is the branding that the country has accepted. Republicans want to let you keep more of your money. Democrats want to take more of your money and give it elsewhere. This is the narrative. Here's the problem with that. It's completely and utterly untrue. In fact, every election cycle from the very first one where I could vote, if you look at the tax plans of both the Democrats and the Republicans, the Democrats cut taxes more for working people, and the Republicans cut taxes more for wealthy people. So here we go, the state of Louisiana. Let me give you some of this. Louisiana's GOP-dominated legislature passed tax cuts on personal and corporate income on Friday in exchange for a statewide sales tax increase, giving Governor Jeff Landry much of what he wanted after his original tax reform package faced mounting resistance from lawmakers and lobbyists. The final passage of the tax measures wrapped up a special legislative session launched November 6th by the governor and his allies. They said their purpose was to make the state's tax code more business-friendly, create jobs, and reverse trends of outward migration from the state. It was the third special legislative session called by Landry, a Republican since he assumed office in January. Critics warned the tax reforms would primarily benefit corporate shareholders and wealthy taxpayers, while the sales tax increase would exacerbate Louisiana's regressive tax system, where poor households pay a higher percentage of their income on taxes. So in other words, this is what's called a regressive tax system. You're effectively increasing taxes on the poor and the middle and lowering them on the wealthy. In fact, I have the exact numbers here for you. So this is what they did. They did a tax increase for Louisianans with incomes under $22,000 a year. The poorest people are going to have to pay more in taxes. They did an average tax cut of $87 for those earning $55,900. And they did an average tax cut of $15,400 a year for the wealthiest 1%. Now, look, you might look at this and say, well, hold on now. This isn't the MAGA plan. This is just some Joe Schmo Republican. Wrong. There was an analysis done recently, and I shared this with you at the time, by the ITEP. And they do, tax policy stuff. They crunched the numbers. Here's what Trump's tax plan would look like. Ready? If you're in the poorest 20%, you have to pay $790 more. If you're in the second 20%, you have to pay $1,430 more. Middle 20%, $1,530 more. Fourth 20%, $1,790 more. Then you have still a tax increase of $610 for the bracket above that. And then the only people that get an effective tax cut under Trump's economic policies, the top 5%. So the top 4 get a tax cut of $7,160, and then the top 1% get a tax cut of $36,320. So the bottom 95% of the country under Trump's tax plan, the bottom 95% see a tax increase, and the top 5% see a tax cut. Remember, guys, it was in Trump's first term that for the first time in U.S. history, the average middle-class family was paying more as a percentage for their taxes than billionaires were. That happened under Trump's first term. The effective tax rate was lower for billionaires than it was for a working-class family. And now they're planning on exacerbating that. They want to shake down the bottom and shake down the middle while letting the rich run out the back door with all the money. Guys, call it what it is. This is class warfare. Especially since we have that Rand Corporation study, which found that from the 1970s until today, the top 1% has stolen $50 trillion from the bottom 90%. $50 trillion. So in other words, if you just kept the wealth disparity the same today as it was in like 1974, if you just did that, every working American in this country would get an extra $1,144 per month, every year for the rest of their life. This is what happens when you have billionaires and corporations completely take over the government. This is what happens when they rig the rules in their favor. This is the kind of system that we're living under. They've already declared class war on you. You might as well declare it back on them. This is what MAGA is for. This is what they support. Louisiana is a classic example of it. It was either Kansas or Oklahoma. I'm blanking on which one. They had a horrific, destructive system that they did in the 2010s, which was horrible, led to massive exploding state deficits, and screwed over working class people, helped out rich people. This is what they do. This is what happened under George W. Bush. This is what happened under Ronald Reagan. This is Republican ideology. This is what it is. So every time they virtue signal like they're in favor of working class people and they're going to cut your taxes, they're not. Don't take their word for it. Look at the actual policies. Look at the actual numbers. Look at the actual results. Because every time they talk about cutting taxes, they don't mean on you. Let me repeat that. They don't mean on you. And the Democrats, by the way, never talk about the fact that really they're in favor of tax cuts for working people. They never really talk about that. But Democrats are more the party that wants to cut taxes for working people. And this is what the Republicans have to offer. So this MAGA hellscape, Hellstate, is only going to get worse and worse and worse. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop. And watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.